So thank you very much. I'm going to introduce myself and our esteemed panelists. So this is a dialogue, so I'm afraid you, the audience here in the room, are going to work a little bit in this dialogue. And our title is Challenges, Shortcomings and Successful Experiences on Occupational Profiles and the Heritage Workforce Market in the light of Charter's recommendations. So our issue here is following on from the really rich dialogue that's just taken place, is where do we actually make changes? So to introduce myself, my name is Nessa Roche. I work with the Irish Ministry, which includes heritage. It's called the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. And my colleague Pirio explained her career trajectory earlier. So my one is it is unimaginable to myself as an 18-year-old to think I will be sitting here in front of an international audience. I did not know such a possibility would exist. I started in architectural glassmaking. I was a craftsperson. I worked in stained glass for a short period in Germany. I did postgraduate qualifications in architectural conservation in Scotland. And then I was a self-employed person. And we know from our own analysis there's a huge degree of self-employment and, as was very clearly explained in the previous panel, of precarity and difficulty, tendering, not having access perhaps to continuing professional development. So self-employment is very difficult. So working for myself, I was very lucky to get a job in a ministry and to specialize then in policy and regulation and skills development. So these are career paths that even today young people often don't see as possibilities because they're not mapped out, and heritage as a sector has been really quite invisible. And this was very well explained in the earlier session this morning, explaining how Charter has done its work and come to its recommendations. So the focus in this session is the ways in which the sector, us in this room and on the stream, can utilize the results of the Charter project. So in our work, in the work of our organizations, and each of us in our individual life, and how can we contribute, how can we help to make the change happen? So as the earlier speaker showed, heritage is so diverse. It involves many different types of stakeholders, and they deal on a daily basis with many roles, different occupational profiles. They manage differing dynamics, challenges, and opportunities. And many times in your daily working life, you deal with heritage in an intersectoral way. You're dealing with the built environment, maybe development archaeology, or it may be digital technology, or it could be craft or public administration, or any kinds of roles, and the heritage element or the heritage capacity requirements of those roles. So using the wide range of expertise in our panel and their experiences in workforce profiles and skills development, we will consider how Charter's recommendations can enable a better and more effective workforce in the field of European heritage. So I'm going to introduce my panelists. They're in the actual program for today, but just to say that Amilcar Vargas is the World Heritage Manager at Casa, Batlló, and I know I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, and he's responsible for the implementation of that convention in the Casa, which is a big responsibility, and I know from my own colleague that you have done an awful lot of work at the international level in terms of World Heritage. Further to my left is Astrid Hannes. She's Project and Policy Manager at ERIN, the European Regions Research and Innovation Network, which is based in Brussels. On my right, I have Karin Drda-Kühn, who's director of the non-profit association Kultur und Arbeit, which supports companies working in the cultural economy, and it has a special focus on qualifying workers for the market. So very much where we need to talk about today. And then further on my right is Mignosa, who's a cultural economist and a foundational person in Charter. You have been central to our work. An assistant professor at the Erasmus School of History, Culture and Communications, and assistant professor of public economics in the University of Catania. So Anna works both in the Netherlands and Italy, which gives a very interesting set of perspectives. So each of our speakers is an expert in their field. So we want an energetic discussion because all of you are experts in your fields as well. And this is going to focus on two questions. And the first question for everybody, but firstly for our panelists, is what do the Charter recommendations, or maybe particular recommendations, mean for your work or your organisation, or perhaps your professional institute? So what in particular is going to help change the game in your work? So I could ask for volunteers, or I could pick on one of our panelists. So who wishes to speak first? Amilcar,
May I?
please.
I was just scrolling on the document and recommendations, and I realized that it should be learned and teach to a wider audience of not just heritage sites managers, but museum managers, in order to incorporate some of these recommendations at their level, either in the conservation, curatorship, or even in the stores of the museums, or in the social media in the museums. So we yesterday, the director of the National Museum of Art of Catalonia mentioned that the museum has changed in the last 10 years more than in the last century. And this change is continued to be growing and growing. And the next generation, the generation of people that were born in the year 2000, they come from a completely digital world, a completely Instagrammable world, and where social media and sharing and traveling and also struggling with the lack of stability. But these recommendations of the project are really key points that should be embedded in the DNA of the structures of the museums. And ironically, museums or heritage institutions are to preserve things that probably should not change, but society change, and people and the next generations, they change too, and the needs of the current society are not the same than the needs of the 19th century in this boom of the very, very big museum collections. So I was just for checking later on in the conversations to see how many of these recommendations we have been following in Casa Batlló, and why, and what others are not, and they are very timely for our next management plan for the next 5 years. That, of course, we will have it in consideration. There are more than 1,000 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. There are thousands of museums in every country. And of course, that means thousands of people, but also millions of visitors, millions of citizens, millions of neighbors that are around the museums and these monuments. And the managers, we should be aware of these recommendations to have it in our daily basis. And it's a very hard work, and congratulations to all the participants, because in our side we will have it into account.
Thank you, Amilcar. And you mentioned about being very timely for the next management plan. And that, I suppose, one of the emphasis that Astrid has been making through the project is policy must be made on evidence. So evidence must be embedded in policies. They cannot be separated. So in terms of workforce development, have you, and the work of Erin and your stakeholders, your organizations, the regional authorities and others, where do you see specific charter recommendations helping to steer us towards embedding the policies with evidence?
Yes, thank you, Nessa, for this very interesting question. And I think there is no one-size-fits-all answer to it, because as you know, with more than 240 regions in Europe, and Erin is representing a bit more than 120 among them, the context, legal competences, and how you make policies is different, obviously, in all of the regions. That being said, I think that what the regions who were part of this project actually illustrated the super diversity of what heritage means, does also how jobs are different depending on the regional typologies, and also the instrumentarium that regions have to work on it. So maybe in that respect, and it was actually voiced by the 6 regions who were part of the case studies that we did, and which were very diverse, from Tuscany in Italy, Alentejo in Portugal, Bremen in Germany, the Basque Country in Spain, Sibiu County in Romania, and Västra Götaland region in Sweden, is that this regional specificity is so rich, but you need the data to tailor your policies to it. And I think all the regions, they underlined that what Charter has tried to, how would I say, pilot in taking an ecosystem approach to what heritage skills governance is actually very useful, because it's about collecting the data. And it seems a very obvious first step, but it's actually not the first step. The first step is knowing who your stakeholders are, and to have it also on the record. They go much beyond the borders of what the heritage sector is. We met stakeholders in construction, in tourism, in urban planning. So mapping this cultural heritage ecosystem is step 1. Who are the stakeholders? Step 2 was really build trust to deepen what basically the representatives of the regions already knew. They knew that they had identified skills gaps and skills needs, but the deep understanding was really not there yet. So bringing the stakeholders together and start a dialogue on to foster the deep understanding of skills gaps and needs was really, I would say, a very important milestone in many of the regions to have a conversation and a dialogue started. And I think this then links back to your question on policies. Mm-hmm. We have seen a lot of very inspiring, I would say, education and training practices who are emerging at local level. And they're very good and they're efficient. But unless they get a policy-embedded approach, they are most likely to remain small scale and possibly not sustainable, or not as sustainable as a sector would like. Okay. So the policymakers really experience this journey to deepen the understanding, strengthen the ecosystem dynamics, and then also they voiced a very explicit need to work on better data to make better policies. And this, of course, comes with data literacy for stakeholders in the sector. Can they provide data that policymakers need? Data analysis, interoperability of data, and then actually use them to work from this ecosystem approach on better skills policies, education and training programs.
Thank you, Astrid. And that very much was, that idea of a culture of data was one which has emerged during our work, that in fact heritage is not unlike other sectors. We cannot always measure things in quantity. There's much that has to be indicated through qualitative, I suppose, evaluations. But the world works on money, basically. Can you quantify something? And that leads me nicely to talk to Anna. I'd like to bring you in, Anna. And Anna contributed very much to this idea of focusing with Eilish Marcel on the taxonomies. And so how this affects, I suppose, workforce development, maybe continuing education and training, are the ways that you apply to for that better and more effective workforce.
Thank you, Nessa. I was sure data would mean me, because as many other people, I'm an economist by training, so it's really somehow weird that I'm in this group doing research, and I'm very happy actually to be there. And from this point of view, I think what is a nice side is that I have this double perspective. I'm an economist very much passionate about heritage, And what I found in like the main result inherent in Charter that has really somehow helped me in my own profession, but then in what I do, because I teach, I'm at university and I train people, is the model in itself. I fully agree with Astrid in this, because I think this is really like the first time that I see looking at heritage as a system. And that is, I think, the stepping stone to really prove that we're talking about a sector, that is relevant for society. So without any doubt, I think this is the first point, which for me is interesting. But then I have a vested interest, of course, because it's interesting because I see also a possibility for my students to find their position. But there again, Astrid, I think you said most of the thing I wanted to say. They need to find a position there. I look at Marzia, who announced me, and I'm very happy that since last December, I could finally get a position at the Ministry of Culture in Italy. But before that, there was no place for me. Absolutely. So you see, though I've been doing it for some years, I mean, I'm quite old there. And so from this perspective, this is also something that helps us with our courses to get something. And of course, I mean, for me, one of the main recommendations is the one about data. Because in my job, when I do research, if I want to assess something about this sector, I need to define it somehow in one way or another. But if we don't have the data, I'm completely lost. If I want to say that there are N people working on this sector in my region, in my country, in one country or another, without those data, I cannot say anything. And my work is not solid. My paper won't be published, again, if I want to be very selfish. But if I want to give policy advice, I feel that my policy advice is true up till a certain point. I'm representing the tip of the iceberg, but I'm not representing the sector. And this is really problematic. So I really hope that this can be a change, because apart from, you know, the border of university, it has really societal relevance.
Indeed, the society and economy, and I think we are, the head of the unit in DG Air, Catherine Magnon, has been very closely following what we're doing and very focused on what this means for economics. This is jobs. In the end of the day, people need fulfilling careers, there needs to be career paths, there needs to be, I suppose, heritage fully activated within the economy. And Karin, you work at that coalface, because this is all about being able to empower people to have those meaningful lives, to contribute to the economy and to society and indeed to the environment. So it is about, I suppose, sustainable management of resources, and people are those resources. Somebody this morning was very much saying it's all the human factor. This is what propels us. So I think your charter recommendations on how to activate help, or how to increase the help you can give to your stakeholders, we'd love to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nessa. Well, I'm the ideal follow-up to Anna, because I'm working exactly where in a place where we want to transfer our stakeholders, cultural workers mainly, to a place where they have a good living, a good income, they have employment, and they have the possibility for skills development. And for that, I was very glad that we got in the recommendation of our charter project the opportunity to work and to show good examples. Margareta already presented them in the morning, and I think coming from the background of training, that we need these good examples in order to show what skills development can mean. And I'll give you an example. Well, when I saw the data which was generated and identified by Alice, I thought, my God, this data shows that the heritage sector has an enormous economic power. You would agree, probably.
The one she showed us.
Yeah.
Yes,
And it's the tip of the iceberg, exactly. But at least I was really, this gave me again the implication, why is this sector not more self-conscious and not more confident in this economic power? And economic power also means innovative power. And obviously our sector has it, but it doesn't make enough use of it. Maybe one of you knows this business canvas model of the American economist Michael Porter. I see some of you who are, yes, wonderful. This model is from 1984. And since then, this business model, which is a structure to help startups, but also established companies to evaluate their future economic power and relevance. And this model is broadly used in economy in all sectors. Is it energy? Is it chemistry? Is it automotive sector? They are using it. But the sector which is not using it for 40 years now is the heritage sector. And therefore, I'm very, very happy that recently, during the last 3 years, 2 European heritage-related research projects, have implemented and have made a transfer of this model, of the business model canvas. They have transferred it to the cultural heritage sector and to the cultural tourism sector. And this means that we now have in the heritage sector tools. And it's also a kind of very interesting example for the breakdown of the circular economy model, which we have identified in the Charter project. And it's also a very good sign for skills development, because these skills will help the sector to get more conscious of the economic power and in the end for more employment opportunities. And I think it's the self-consciousness to make more of our resources.
And that's actually interesting. We have a second question, and we will go to the audience maybe for 1 or 2 questions before that, if there's a bit of a dialogue. But in relation to what you're saying, Karin, the Charter's 6 functions, we have the core functions, so it's recognition, preservation and safeguarding, and engagement and use. The systemic functions, 2 of those, I think, perhaps we're the ones maybe discussing in this, how to generate a better workforce. There's management as a function, and then governance and policy making. And the function of management and of, I suppose, that brings us to perhaps forecasting as governance and policy making. Where do we go from here, and how do we apply it in daily work? And that Porter structure is very useful. And you absolutely, I think there's this lack of confidence of seeing ourselves perhaps as an economic driver. And World Heritage, the World Heritage Site concept perhaps is an interesting one, because it is clear that it does generate economic heft, where places are classified, and it's a long and very arduous job to be recognized, to have that validation procedure. There are particular types of career and skills developments that nobody ever really associated with heritage until there had to be those who specialize in preparing the applications. And Amilcar, you have been involved in this area of work.
Yeah, undoubtedly that one of the key for the success of Casa Batlló as a business model is that it's managed by a local business family who were the owners of the company of lollipops, Chupa Chups. So they have their business state of mind, and they put the people at the center. When we talk with museums and we use the word clients, it's like a crime. They are not clients, they are visitors, they are citizens. Sorry, they are clients, because they are paying with their taxes what you're doing in your museums, in the public museums. In our case, visitors are the center of everything. And I repeat myself, and I'm sure this is recorded, we have a people-centered approach, not a heritage-centered approach. And this is not dramatic, but it is really relevant, because For having heritage as a heritage, you need people. Otherwise, you have stones, rocks, and mountains, and empty houses. You need people for having heritage being heritage. You need people for the museums. Do you imagine a cinema or a movie, wonderful movie, with nobody sitting watching that movie? You can have the best movie in the world, but you need people watching that movie. You need people reading these books. So, of course, you may like or dislike the movie or the book, but you cannot have a book-centered approach. You need the reader-centered approach. So for us, having the satisfaction, the pleasure of walking through and having an unforgettable experience in Casa Batlló is our main goal as a business. We are a company, so we are a sort of for-profit organization, so we are self-funded. As a restaurant with a Michelin star, it's not that cheap, it's not for going there every night or every day for having a lunch or having a meal, but we are committed to give the visitors the most unforgettable experience of their lives. And I know I'm putting the bar very high for your visit this afternoon, but I will be very glad of giving you, challenge myself for giving you one of the most unforgettable heritage experience of your whole life.
And
in just 60 minutes.
Okay, and Amilcar was explaining to me yesterday evening, and this relates particularly to one of our recommendations on striving towards a viable, diverse heritage workforce. Tell the audience about your communications team.
Well, our communications team, our website, our digital channels are our main communication media, and it's basically for sharing and encouraging how to buy a ticket for visiting the museum or the heritage site. And one of the most human values and humanistic approach is that 85% of our visitor care team are in the autism spectrum. I repeat, 85% of the people that will welcome you this afternoon, they had or autism or dyspraxia or TDHA or some of these neurodivergent conditions. So we have been awarded of that, and we are very proud that there are people that are struggling with finding a job and reading about this. They're working in a museum, but they are not curators, they are not historian of arts, but they do a very important work that is welcoming 2 million people per year. That's a lot. And we have psychologists and emotional support for the staff. Because in Casa Batlló, when I said putting people at the center, it's not just the 2 million visitors, it's the more than 150 staff members. I have a psychology in Casa Batlló, and I have a therapist in Casa Batlló that deals with my burning out or pre-burning out, my emotional conditions, my problems of miscommunication with my colleagues that in any other human organization exist. And with all these struggles, we have a permanent staff dealing with that. For the visitor care team, for the staff in the office, and for me, and for the director, or for all of us. We have meditations in Casa Batlló, we have Tai Chi, we have these other words that I cannot pronounce, of Asian or stuff. So we have even participated in the Week of Silence, where we have meditations at 7 a.m. in the main floor of Casa Batlló. So we are really taking care of mental health, of taking care of the people who welcome other people. And this is our non-conventional works in a museum, because museums, we are thinking in the 19th century perspective of a museum, but we are on the 2024, and we are having a pandemic that we will pass probably in 100 years. And I think, and with this I will finish this part of my contribution, one of the success of the Casa Batlló is that we have very few people from the museum and heritage sector in the management team. And we have other non-conventional museums expertises like communication, like experience development, like audience analysis, like metadata, behavior specialists, and we have economics, we have people from the finance sector, and I was looking to Anna to say that we have economists in Casa Batlló, so we know about numbers, we know about Excel tables, not just wonderful pictures, and there is a work behind. Of course, we have a lot of technology in the house and all these IT people that I cannot understand. So having non-conventional profiles in the museum really enriches the conventional task in the museum in a very outstanding way. But we have to, as a site manager, and me as an archaeologist with a background in accountability, I have 2 degrees, it is important to let other knowledge to be in contact with you. And we have repeated this again and again for ages, to stop the silos state of mind, because only when you are in contact with something that is different to you, you will learn something that you don't know.
That's a very good way to start asking the audience. We'll take 2 short questions, maybe we're halfway through our session, and this relates to our recommendation number 12, cross-pollination. Heritage doesn't exist on its own. It is actually a sort of layer of fairy dust in the world, because it's where people are, there is heritage. So any questions? We have some microphones ready to take questions. If you wish to think of your question in a few minutes, write it down, and we'll take more questions at the end of the next round with the panel. No volunteers? Okay. Keep your question there, and we'll go to our next question. And it's really leading on from the previous one. So the next question is essentially about how may specific charter recommendations help the area of heritage which your organization serves. And it might be that it's a subsector, it might be archaeology, or it might be museum development. It could be broad or specific. But how will our recommendations help your area to have a better and more effective workforce? So I'm going to start on the right-hand side now. So maybe Anna, thank you.
Thanks, Nessa. Thanks a lot. And actually, this is, you were just mentioning the recommendation number 12, and when you had asked me before, it was one of the recommendations that I found more important to answer this question. Actually, together with the third, which is this complementarity between core and transversal skills. For me, they somehow go a bit hand in hand. I think a lot of connection. I see a lot of connections there. And there is where I think this is something that can improve. I mean, if I think again next to me, to improve the education that we give. I think it's important to have cultural economists, but I think it's important for cultural economists to know about heritage, to know about museums. Otherwise, that's a big mistake. I'm an economist, but I don't think that you can run a museum the way you would run a company producing cars or anything else. There are some nuances that you need to consider. There are really different concepts. Starting from the same concept of heritage, it was very nice what it was just said, we start from people. But actually in our model, we've been talking a lot about that. I see the people, we've been having this discussion. Heritage, people, heritage. Sometimes we had really difficulties in finding a divide between them, in the sense that it's true that without people you don't have heritage, without heritage you don't have people. We've been hearing all the time people saying we start with language because language is identity, so heritage is our identity. And from this point of view, I think it's very, very important to have this cross-disciplinarity in our courses. But at the same time, I think it's important, and the example is perfect. We were talking about that with Margherita coming here. It's super, super good, because I hear a lot talking about heritage as a fragile sector. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert, so you blame me. For me, heritage is a super, super strong sector that can really contribute to society in an amazing way. The thing is the way we deal with that. And what we are writing here, this idea of having cross-disciplinarity, applying a different model that my colleague in Catania would tell me, go away, you don't belong here. It's something that can really make the difference. And if we're talking about a private organization having 150 employees, we're talking about a company, okay? We're talking about something that produces economy, but in a different way compared to the way we've been thinking a lot. And that's, I think, where there are a lot of opportunities for all these new professions, but we have to think differently also in terms of business models, of economic models. Maybe we won't be all hired by the ministry, so we can save this terrible exam we were listening about before. We can avoid that, but we can make our own small company. And this is where, again, I'm influenced by heritage, working in Holland. You know, there, everything is an opportunity. And I see all the students in Holland creating their small startup. So at the moment I'm working with an archaeologist who thought that he didn't want to be an archaeologist, he wanted to be a different archaeologist. And he created this startup to communicate the importance of archaeology to students, to young people, to people in general. But he has his own company, he's working. Okay, he's starting, it's difficult, but he's starting. So I think there are enormous opportunities there, but we have to make them emerge. And then they have to emerge as a heritage company, which at the moment, Karin, you're right, it's a lot, but it's 0.7% of the total amount of the cultural and creative industries. And I don't believe it is so, because there are a lot of companies which are under other groups, and that can become a bigger group. Because, yes, it's true, it's right, but when we say 0.7 to a politician, that's the zero before. That's not enough. It's not interesting enough. It's not a sector that we can support. It's not important for our society. But when we can start proving that it's actually something more, we overcome the zero, it's already a way to make this sector boost.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Anna. So yes, the question of the recommendations in particular, so the model, the cross-disciplinary approach. So the emerging and innovative guidelines are really a way of trying to merge, or to interact with others. So continuing education and training perhaps very much is what is the model for those already in employment. So Karin, I think that perhaps, is there one in particular of the recommendations that you can bring back to Kultur and Arbeit and make it relevant to your stakeholders?
Yeah, I always try to bring things to the very concrete level. And for us, as a direct outcome of Charter is, and also because we strongly believe that these interdisciplinary aspects are the core issues in our sector in the future, linked to the skills development. Mm-hmm. And we are going to implement from next week an own European project, the SATCULT project, which Margarita already kindly mentioned, where we will bring Earth observation from satellites to the heritage sector. So the outcome will be that we want to have a big share of this big cake, which is currently linked to Earth observation. I want to have this link to the heritage sector, because with Earth observation we can really help the heritage sector to find solutions in climate change, for war damages, and for many other topics. And if we come to the point that we come to the big money, and this money is in sectors like space, yeah. So a cooperation with the European Space Agency will bring us to another level. I hope so. And this will mean we have to train the workforce, and we will do this. It will take some time, but we will do this to help our sector to gain new skills in order also maybe to solve this always upcoming money question, the funding question. But this is what we gain from another sector. But I think this is not the only point. The other point is, what can we give to other sectors. And we should not underestimate the power what we can give. And a perfect example of that is linked to our recommendation number 2, which is linked to the loss of the heritage skills. I'm absolutely convinced that many heritage skills could contribute to very urgent problems which we currently have in our societies. And just to name 2 examples, or 3, it's energy efficiency and recycling. Heritage-related topics are closely linked to recycling, and I think that what we can give to other sectors is well-proven technologies, because our ancestors, they were clever. They were really clever in terms of, for example, insulation, and also how to reuse materials in a clever way. And bringing this to the construction sector, to the upcycling and recycling sector, I think this could make not only a huge difference, but also to create new jobs, linked to new skills, and make it beneficial for society and in the end for all of us.
Thank you, Karin. Yes, absolutely. So that having sustainable ways of being and living, so from the high-tech European Space Agency cooperation and the ways that heritage maybe perspectives can perhaps infiltrate this very technological worldview, then down to the very, very, I suppose, particular issue of the loss of heritage skills. I'm going to talk to you, Astrid, on this one, because working at a regional level across Europe and the question of heritage skills loss, but the potential, and Erin is a research and innovation network, the potential to work with areas like circular economy and to help regions both upskill, perhaps, or help their own workforces and address their other policies, be it in smart specialization or circular economy. That's perhaps an area, I think, for that you can give the audience some perspectives.
Yes, thank you for the question, Nessa. I think I'm very much aligned with the previous panelists already shared. This cross-pollination, I think it's really one of the gateways to really leverage expertise and leverage resources from other sectors and working together. So I think there are so many obvious links and synergies to be found between the contemporary construction sector, circular economy, repurposing of buildings, reuse of materials, green dismantlement, you name it. There is a lot of expertise in the sector, but of course, again, and I think this brings me to, I think, the more fundamental thing I would like to change is that there are many good projects, but it all comes down to policy. And I think this is basically, in the end, what this project is about. How do you unlock investments for skills development? And I think I can share a few very concrete results that the regions already set up so far, what they're doing, because this is, how would I say, the legacy of Charter is already coming alive. And when we talk about skills development, how to put it simply, I would say it's about policy, it's about programs, and it's about investments. So when we talk about policies, education and training policies, for example, Tuscany region will update their regional development strategy 2025. In this strategy, it will be the first months of next year. There will be an embedding of the skills ecosystem analysis approach, and it will be used for other sectors than just heritage. So first of all, tools of Charter methodologies will be mainstreamed. This is a very first thing. Second, in the same update of the policy of Tuscany region, they will specifically take action on recognition for occupations at risk. For example, there is a specific case on stone crafters in Italian scalpellini. So there will be a specific point taking into account in the policy that they know this occupation is disappearing, yet very important, so they will take it up. So this is, to give you an example, Tuscany region, Another example, the Basque Country region, they, through all the work that they did through Charter, they actually already took the next step, because now they systemized the ecosystem gathering to discuss skills for the sector on a rhythm of every 2 years. So they are already repeating and deepening the findings. And also our colleagues, Ainoa from the museum unit, she specifically identified the need for more short course quality trainings, offers to professionals where the colleagues from the university are stuck in rigid systems and they cannot change quick and adapt quick enough. So there is a specific action point. Basque Country will look into that to cover that gap. Mm-hmm. Besides that, in the Basque Country, they actually established a regional skills partnership in March of this year. It is a broader one because it's for cultural and creative industries, but at least the idea of a skills partnership is there. So the Basque Country committed to deepen this and even consider to do still the extra last mile for heritage to make it specific and get the potential out there. Mm-hmm. But also, for example, the Basque University, who was very close involved in the work, they will update their bachelor and training master programs in 2 years. They will use the content from Charter work on the emerging curricula. They're already working on the green transition and skills in terms of the digital era, but this will be more strongly embedded in their programs. Mm-hmm. So this is what we see happening there. And then linked to policy, what was also very interesting in being part of a Charter alliance and a big community is that you see the cross-pollination happening as you speak. So, for example, the colleagues from Västra Götaland region in Sweden, they were very much inspired by the colleagues from Tuscany because they see how you bring heritage into education and training policies. They saw how you actually do this whole of government approach to streamline what they are already working in within their department, so to actually build the capacity there. And I think again, in the idea of what is a skills partnership and what should it be, in Sweden, they already have, I think now it was the 15th edition, every 2 years they do this big conference on built heritage. It's already, I would say, multi-level skills partnership because it's the region, Västra Götaland, that is involved, it's the University of Gothenburg that is involved, it's the National Heritage Board that is involved. There are 2 associations for building conservation and preservation, and they gather 500 people every 2 years. And they talk about methodologies, new approaches, materials, but now, after Charter, the awareness has become so big that skills as a topic deserves to be anchored in that partnership that they already have. There is a remaining challenge for Västra Götaland because they are very strong and also advanced in circular economy and heritage. But intangible heritage is really still a challenge on how to embed this in the overall work. And that actually then, I think, bridge very nicely to Alentejo region, which is a very big region, rural region in Alentejo, where we worked. They were so inspired by what the Swedish colleagues in Västra Götaland are doing in their NAS Center for Building Conservation Preservation. So it's a center of the region supporting private owners of traditional buildings, how to preserve your house, how to use the materials, where to find the craftsmen, they organize training. So this model, along with the model that we explored in CBU, where we had the Casa Artefacts, which was actually is a center set up by a museum being recognized as a formal accreditation center of the National Agency of Education and Training to certify craft skills, allowing the people to have the certification and also access public contracts and public jobs with that certification. These 2 models were so inspiring for Alentejo that they are now currently looking into how can they not copy-paste it, but how can they transfer these approaches to secure in a more systemic way that skills are recognized and skills are being transferred, because this then links back to what was one of the very specific needs identified in Alentejo before the start of the project, but even deeper during the project, is that the knowledge of traditional building methods and the knowledge on traditional materials is currently not integrated in engineering studies. It's not there. Yet, the percentage of the traditional buildings in Alentejo is very big. So, I think this is also how being part of an European ecosystem, if you want to call it, can change the game. And then maybe just the last thing that I wanted to share with you is that in the state of Bremen, where we worked on maritime cultural heritage, so it's the city of Bremerhaven, many traditional ships and vessels and cranes, and they have a really challenging skills situation, because in the area there is no initial training, not in vet, not in higher education, to train workforce to work in maritime cultural heritage. They have hundreds of boats. They have thousands of lovers of ships. They have many volunteers who are working on it, but they don't have the training. So what we saw after Charter is that raising the awareness of so many non-formal training courses that are given by volunteers are critical to sustain the cultural heritage, but there is a need for upskilling on ethics, standards, working together with experts. So this was critical. It was put on the agenda. And even better, beyond putting it on a political agenda, they established a public-private fund with money to actually support these associations, to allow them, with their volunteers, to work under the supervision of heritage experts from the German Schifffahrt Museum, the Maritime Museum, to actually gain these skills that they don't have currently, but to make sure that they preserve and contribute, like that their contribution is valorized and also approached in a way that it's good for the heritage and sea. So I think overall for the regions, the tools, the methods, working in an ecosystem and connecting the dots with other networks, other regions, other actors, also maybe the non-usual ones, was really a big gain from this project. And I'm very happy that I can share these results, because it shows that putting the topic on the agenda is the first thing, but in the end it's about unlocking investment to actually get trainings and upskilling and reskilling done. And so it is possible. And I think Charter was a game changer in that respect.
So the human factor and the differing, leading by example, showing others, mentoring, bringing along certain areas are very, very far advanced in some respects and not in others. World Heritage Sites operate at an international level. So this is a kind of a network that has no comparative, we can't compare it with any other, but perhaps for the question, I suppose, is for you working in one World Heritage Site, are there recommendations which we have made that will help the World Heritage Site, the concept, the working of it, the management, the skills development in World Heritage? How can our recommendations help this huge monolithic machine, if you like, that's spread all over the world, to have a better and more effective workforce? And it may be small things, it may be some of the concepts that have been mentioned here. Please, have you thoughts? This is a difficult one, and it's the last.
Thank you, Nessa. And I will be very short, because it is undoubtedly the recommendation of the Charter project that will be considered in the next version of the Casa Batlló apprenticeship program that I'm very glad of having 2 of our apprentices and 1 of the UNESCO volunteers who was and were in this year. And I'm talking to Amber, to Alexandra, to Pamela, because they have names and last names. They were joining the Casa apprenticeship program on their 5th edition. It's annual, so, and they are giving us a good input on how to improve this apprenticeship program. And I'm saying apprenticeship program and not using interns program, because for us, they are young professionals that they are in the last step in the ladder of education. And what happened next? They fall apart, because museums in education, we think in children, in elementary school, but MA students, they are students as well, and they are our main educational focus. And the recommendation of Charter project will, of course, help us to improve this apprenticeship program, that on the next editions and for the next 5 years, we will have to learn what we have done in these last 5 years when we started in person, then in pandemic and online, and then hybrid, and now in person again. And of course, to include how can we do the selection process, because we don't want to disappoint the participants in the apprenticeship program. Probably we don't have what they're looking for. I was sharing that in the volunteers we had, and Pamela, she knows very well, we had a volunteer who wanted to work with archives in Casa Batlló, and the chances we have an archive in historical documents and archive in digital archive. And she was disappointed because she was working in digital archive and she wanted to clean objects and to put in envelopes and to preserve it forever. And we were dealing with digital archives because in Casa Batlló we don't print pictures anymore. Even for sustainable reasons, we don't print images anymore. But we need to archive these JPG, PNG, and these other files. And that is archiving in a heritage site. Yes, it is 2024. That's the kind of archiving we need. And probably some people, they are expecting from us things that we don't have. So the Casa Batlló apprenticeship program will learn a lot from your recommendations. And this is, for the apprentices, we are a platform. We don't hire apprentices every 6 months. We ask them to use us as a platform. It's like in the trampoline in the Olympic Games. They have to do the effort. Otherwise, you only walk down and jump to the swimming pool, and that's it. The volunteers and the apprentices, they have to do an effort. We are the platform. Use us as your platform and jump to the next stage of your life. And try to be as the last step in the ladder of their education. We will always be learning, but we might stop being students. And we have to be clear on that and to break a little bit this student state of mind and then open the young professional state of mind and then moving forward on the professional area. And the second area of Casa Batlló that we'll learn from Charter Project is our main team. We have management team management style that is named TEAL, T-E-A-L. And I recommend you to read the book, Reinventing Organizations, by the French author Frédéric Laloux. Reinventing Organizations proposes how can we do working teams from the inner motivation of the worker instead of the oppressive direction of the leaders above us. So from the bottom up, and that is the TEAL proposal, from the bottom up, the team is motivated to do their contribution on their steps. And there is some of the recommendations that are linked to how can we inspire these vocations. And let's be honest, some people in the museums, they don't like museums. They don't like their jobs. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. But we cannot be happy in everywhere, every time. I am aware of that. I'm the first one. So, but we really would like that in the next generations, in the universities, the students can find their own vocation. That's why I have 2 bachelor's degrees, because I started as an accountant because I couldn't find my vocation before. But then, just traveling, I found the World Heritage Move sites and plaques and places, and I really fell in love. And I had an epiphany when I was 19 years old, and that was my vocation. I didn't know that at the end I was becoming a site manager of a UNESCO site, knowing other UNESCO site managers, wonderful all around the world. But my vocation is World Heritage, and I'm sure of that. And probably I will not have a retreat, because in the 2050, I don't know if that will exist. But my vocation is that. What is your vocation? What is your student's vocation? What is your staff vocations? It's never too late to find it. I found it when I was 19, but someone that finds it when they are retired at 65. That's perfectly fine. And thank you so much.
Thank you. And there are many different ages in our audience, and indeed career changes are absolutely part of the heritage workforce, and we need to nurture them and give them that route in. Did anybody think of questions while we were talking and while our really fantastic discussions, articulation by panelists? Barbara Stacker, thank you. So at the front. Okay. There should be a mic, yeah.
No, yes, thank you for this very informative and interesting contributions, all of you thinking of how Charter is inspiring you to this or that, or the different peer learnings between the regions. So I'm just wondering, is this going to be, can we read about this in the final outputs of the Charter project? Like not hidden somewhere in a footnote in one of these huge reports, but somewhere accessible for policymakers to clearly make the point, you know, what has been achieved by Charter and what's the way to follow. Because of course, if the Basque Country and Sweden and Alentejo did a wonderful learning, or Toscana, of course, Toscana has already implemented all these things. So maybe there is this is a way to go, but in the recommendations, yeah, I mean, it's quite complicated to read them, so I'm not really sure that I would immediately understand out of the recommendations in concrete terms, you know. So maybe it's just a question of having somebody go through all of these documents, what we have also discussed with from Sweden here, the professor, that basically maybe you need also somebody who goes through all this work that you have done, leave the part for the universities, and then just write for policymakers or for different groups which are addressed in the recommendations, something very simple, like the professor from Sweden also was suggesting, yes, to have, let's say, just a, you know, one page with a picture, with a web link, to actively, in simple words, you know, to make this communication exercise also. And also because in the morning somebody was talking about the file called Limbo. Yes. I mean, where you have hidden all these wonderful case studies that you did. I mean, you know, yes, please make some cases available easily and easily findable, and yeah, thank you.
I can answer your question right away, because I was part with Margarita and Martina in the so-called examples team. I think this is exactly what you're asking for. These examples, which are currently called the Limbo document, but in fact, these examples, it will be about 30, 35 examples, around that number. And these are examples, what is already done as, and they will act as a huge inspiration, what is overall in Europe distributed as examples how to transfer the recommendation on the ground. Very practical, short, with links, with basic information, and it will be done similar to this OMC report on the financial services. You might remember that. I mean, this report is now 9 years old, but I know from my own experience, people reading this report, they read the examples first. And this was also for me a kind of indicator how important the examples are. And I'm very glad that my colleagues in the examples team share this opinion. And the example will be a kind of core inspiration from the recommendation, bring them to the ground.
Mm-hmm. And we hope to extract the case studies. They're in one of the reports, as you say, the regional case studies report. And that material is available in a format already to attach to the skills strategy, which will be the overall final document. And that will help to I suppose, make more immediate the way the regional authorities and our partners took the challenge of charter. They put in an awful lot of work to prepare to actually map their landscape first as in preparation for the workshops that were held. So there are actually regional case study fact sheets which are in the report, but we can extract them and put them as an appendix to the skills strategy. Again, it's inspiration, showing by doing, really, and this is how we really do make it human. Again, it's the human factor, show the possibilities. So yes, absolutely, make them accessible to policymakers. And as one of those policymakers, I know that it needs to be short and sharp and actually quite practical, but universal. It's a difficult balance, but yes, indeed, thank you. Yes, Terry, there's a microphone there near you.
Is that working? Thanks very much. Thank you to the panel for your wonderful insights. I just wanted to share what a catalyst the Charter project has been for us all in the Irish context, because we've got a situation where we've got a huge programme of the Just Transition. We've got the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, Article 30, which encourages improved participation in sport, heritage and culture. And putting that together with the our Tourism Island funding, we've been able to use the Charter as the catalyst to actually pull all these together and to explore how Recommendation 3 is actually showing us how to foster transdisciplinarity. And we're hoping that a lot of these elements are going to allow us to involve persons with disabilities and upskilling of heritage skills, and putting that with the funding for the transition of people who are now not able to work in our bogs anymore, extracting peat, but they're now going to go into other wonderful heritage-based skills and bring them to the next generation. So thank you, Charter.
Thank you. Thanks, Terry. Yes, there's a third row. Thanks. We have another 1 minute, 2 minutes. I can't see that, Louise. I don't know how long more we have got. Anyway, Marlene.
Yeah, I want to take the opportunity to ask Mr. Vargas a question. I'm Marlene Hovland-Mol from Erasmus University, and I'm really inspired by your center-based people approach for your organization, and also the very inclusive way you approach people and culture. But that also comes with a price, you know, to give people the opportunity to have the best experience of a museum comes with a certain price, and that comes with a certain threshold. We also talk about formal, informal learning. Visiting a museum is a form of informal learning. And I was wondering, if I may ask you that straightforward question, how can you make sure that you have an inclusive approach to engage all people, the whole public, to be able to visit your museum? Thank you.
Thank you. We have in our website among the different discounts we have. We have for 46 million Spanish residents in this country, 50% discounts as the most headline. So 50% discount for this for all the residents in Spain, regardless their nationality, profession, age. Children are free up to 12 years old. We have a self-funded company, so we don't have the public fund for having public prices. And one of the other discounts for students, and we have an email for academic requests, where when they request discounts or free entrance because they need to take pictures of something or to have the experience for doing a master's degrees work or a bachelor's degrees. And we have also online material for schools. We have 17 different video tutorials for how to do activities related to inspired in Casa Batlló, and we have developed in the last 3 years also online free access materials. They will be online soon that are talking about 12 different topics, global topics, inspired or using the house as a tool for learning. For instance, we have a document for how tolerance, LGBTQ, sustainability, nature conservation, other kind of transdisciplinary topics where we use Casa Batlló as a platform. How can we see the diversity? How would I see all the color of the LGBTQI plus flag, etc., or how we deal with the neurodiversity? There is a workshop for the professors to do on their works. And regarding the price, indeed, we don't have a free access except for these children or for people with disabilities and their accompanions. But if you scroll down, you can always address to info@casabatlló.cat if you need, for any reasons, special or prices or free access. If we have 2 million people visiting the house, paying just 35-40 euros per each, so we can afford some free entrance as well. But yeah, one of the things regarding the price is that when you have a high price, you have a high expectations created, and that's a challenge. So an expensive menu creates expensive rewards, and we are happy that through our measurements and through the companion of our staff, people they ended, and you will see by your round, they ended the visit clapping after paying 45 euros.
Oh, well,
it is amazing. I'm not saying that you have to clap, but just to observe as an anthropologist, what is the behavior of the people and how they finish the visit clapping. So I haven't seen that in any other museum in the world. In a museum, of course, in a movie, in a theater, you clap at the end in a concert.
We will have to do some clapping of our lovely panelists now, actually, because we have absolutely run out of time. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.